The alchemists called it the Philosopher's Stone, the legendary substance said to transmute lead into gold, to heal all wounds, and to grant immortality. Yet behind this myth lies a deeper truth. For the real stone was never material. It was psychological, spiritual, and profoundly human, the symbol of a soul made whole. Through Nigredo, we faced our darkness. Through Albedo, we purified our awareness. Through Rubedo, we united our opposites. And now, the stone emerges, consciousness embodied, radiant and alive. Carl Jung, the pioneering Swiss psychiatrist, saw this stone as the archetypal self, the ultimate goal of the psyche's journey towards integration and completeness. It represents the totality of the psyche, a perfect and harmonious union of both the conscious and unconscious realms, integrated into a single, indivisible and living unity. This is the culmination of the great work, the opus magnum of the alchemists, which Jung reinterpreted as the process of individuation. The stone is not some external magical object to be discovered or created in a laboratory. It is the inner gold, the profound and transformative realization that the wholeness, meaning, and divinity you once desperately sought in the external world, in relationships, achievements, or ideologies, has always resided within you, dormant and waiting to be uncovered. This inner gold is the essence of your being, purified and brought into full consciousness. It is the treasure that was buried under the leaden weight of your persona, your unexamined assumptions, and the shadows you refused to acknowledge. The alchemical journey, with its stages of calcination, dissolution, and coagulation, is a metaphor for the psychological processes required to excavate this treasure. It involves the painful burning away of the ego's attachments, the dissolving of rigid psychological structures, and the subsequent reintegration of all the disparate parts of your psyche into a new, more resilient, and more authentic form. When this process reaches its conclusion, the stone emerges not as a static achievement, but as a dynamic and living center of your being. It is the realization of the self, the moment when your individual consciousness becomes a clear and shining vessel for the universal and the timeless. When the inner work is complete, and the philosopher's stone is formed within the crucible of the soul, the rigid boundary that once separated the self from the world begins to soften and dissolve. The sense of being an isolated ego, a solitary island of consciousness adrift in an indifferent or hostile universe, gives way to a more profound and interconnected mode of existence. The ancient mystics and Neoplatonic philosophers spoke of this interconnected reality as the Anima Mundi, or the world soul. This is the belief that the entire cosmos, the universe in its totality, is a single, living and breathing organism, animated by a universal soul, a divine intelligence that permeates all things. To awaken the philosopher's stone within is to come into direct experiential realization of this truth. It is to understand that your individual psyche is not a separate, self-contained entity, but rather a microcosm that reflects the macrocosm. Your consciousness is not an isolated phenomenon, but an integral and inseparable part of the world soul itself. You are a unique and individuated expression of the universe's own consciousness. As this realization deepens, the external world ceases to appear as a collection of random, disconnected objects and events. Instead, it transforms into a living, breathing mirror of your own inner state. Each moment, each encounter, and every synchronicity becomes a meaningful reflection of the divine order, the universal intelligence working through you and speaking to you. The world no longer happens to you. It unfolds with you and through you, and you recognize your own soul's signature in the patterns of reality. True transformation, the kind symbolized by the philosopher's stone, is not a flight from the world or an escape into some disembodied, transcendent heaven. It is the very opposite. It is a radical and courageous act of embodiment. The ultimate goal of the alchemical opus is not to leave the messy, imperfect material world behind, but to bring the divine light, the spiritual gold, down into it. The stone is not found in a state of pure transcendence, but in the sacred marriage of heaven and earth, spirit and matter, consciousness and form, all consummated within the vessel of one's own being. It is the full and unflinching incarnation of the self into the fabric of everyday life. To live from the self, to live as the embodied stone, is to live symbolically. This means that life is no longer experienced as a series of profane, meaningless events, but as a sacred text rich with meaning and purpose. Every act, from the most mundane to the most significant, becomes a ritual, an expression of your deepest, most authentic nature. Every relationship is perceived as sacred, an opportunity for mutual growth, reflection, and the co-creation of meaning. Every challenge, every obstacle, and even every failure is no longer seen as a setback or a curse, but as a profound invitation to greater wholeness, a new opportunity to integrate a neglected aspect of the self. The alchemists called this lifelong endeavor the opus magnum, the great work. Carl Jung gave it a new name for the modern age: individuation. And you, in the context of your own life, might simply call it the path of self-mastery, the conscious and continuous art of becoming who you truly are. The Philosopher's Stone is not an object to be possessed, a final destination to be reached, or a static trophy to be displayed. It is a state of being, a dynamic and ever-unfolding process of becoming. It is the luminous moment of recognition when the finite human and the infinite divine perceive themselves not as two separate entities, but as a single, unbroken continuum. It is the experience of unity consciousness, where the wave understands it is, and has always been, the ocean. This sacred state is not found through grand external quests, but in the quiet, humble turning of attention inward. In the profound stillness of your own awareness, when the ceaseless chatter of the ego subsides, the world itself becomes luminous, revealing its hidden radiance. The lead of ordinary perception is transmuted into the gold of enlightened consciousness. The stone shines quietly and eternally in the deep chamber of the heart, a timeless, universal symbol of the infinite made beautifully, vulnerably, and perfectly human.